Maybe here we go. So, welcome to the India International Group of the Fulbright Alumni Association's uh, 2025 Film Festival. We also call ourselves FIIG or FIG. I am delighted to see all of you. I am the president of FIG, and like all our events and programs, this festival is a space for connecting, a venue for collaborating, and a platform for our members to showcase their work. This festival exemplifies the board's objective to make the India Interest Group a virtual home for its members. The idea was born when one of our members, Carlin Davis, reached out and we began to explore ways to share her work. 8 months, many WhatsApp conversations, and a few Zoom calls later, we have our first film festival. We hope you enjoyed watching the very carefully curated selection of films and are very glad you are here to participate in the discussion with the panelists. We wanted to maximize your time with our talented panelists, so there won't be any visuals during the discussion. I will introduce the moderators and they will introduce you to the panelists as they dive into the discussions. Before I hand over the screen, I will say a few quick thank yous. My deepest gratitude to the Planning Committee and John Borston, who joined us as a juror. Because of their unwavering commitment and professionalism, each detail was carefully thought out and implemented. Thank you, Corlin and Jeff. My deepest gratitude to our donors. Your generosity has funded this festival and made future programs possible. A valuable gift to the entire community in today's uncertain times. Thank you also to the FIG Board of Directors for their support and counsel throughout the planning and implementation of the festival. Special thanks to our marketing team, led by board member Nirja Vashist, who was diligent about the social media posts despite a severe hand injury and a very tight lab schedule. To Alexa Bernstein, a community member who helped get the emails out on schedule, very critical, and a very talented graphic designer, Divya Iyer Singh, who makes all our flyers. Many thanks to all the university departments who helped to spread the word, to Munir Saig and Sophia Gillespie of the Fulbright Association's national office, who were instrumental in helping us iron out technical challenges along the way. And thank you, Diana Marshall, for being my tech savior for today's event. I truly appreciate you. I hope this festival will be a memorable experience for all of you. The moderator for our final panel is Jeffrey Stanley. Jeff is a filmmaker, screenwriter, and legacy Fulbright alumni ambassador. He was a 2018 through 2019 Fulbright Nehru Scholar to India, where he researched late 19th and early 20th century Bengali films and theater history and their impact on India's nascent independence movement. He is an adjunct faculty at NYU Tisch School of the Arts and Drexel University Westfall College of Media Arts and Design. He has been a fellow at Jeff, how do you say this? Yaddo?
Yaddo?
Okay. A Copeland Fellow at Amherst College and a guest screenwriting lecturer at the Imaginary Academy Summer Film and Theater Workshop in Croatia, sponsored by the Soros Foundation. A first-generation college graduate, he holds an MFA in dramatic writing from Tisch and a BFA from Tisch in film and television production. And in his alternate universe, he plays Fortnite and has beaten both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. So I was told not to diss his mad gaming skill.
Well,
Jeff?
you really dug deep. That last part is important because I have a lot of game design students taking screenwriting classes, so I have to show them that I'm relevant. So, and I have a 14-year-old. So, are we ready to dive in, Renalini?
Yes, it's yours.
Woo, all right. Well, I'm going to give some brief introductions in no particular order, except this is the order I rewatched these three films in and took notes on them. And I have a couple of questions for each filmmaker to get us started. We have Dr. Zoe Sharinian, who directed Sakthi Vibrations. She's a professor of ethnomusicology and an affiliate professor of women and gender studies at the University of Oklahoma, and a Fulbright Senior Research Fellow to Tamil Nadu, and the recipient of a Fulbright IIE Dissertation Fellowship. So yeah, talk about being an intimidating company all day with these. We have Ashish Kumar, who directed Go On Rituparna. Excuse me, he's the professor of radio, television, and film at Hofstra University, two-time Fulbright Specialist Grant for travel to New Delhi and Durban, South Africa, and a Fulbright Senior Scholar Awardee to Hyderabad. And Miriam Chandy Minicheri from The Shadows. She's a film director and producer based in India. She founded Filament Pictures in 2005, a production house which creates socially relevant feature-length documentaries. And she was a Fulbright visiting scholar, maybe is a Fulbright visiting scholar to UT Austin, University of Texas, Austin. Forgive me, all of you, if I left anything out. We can correct that later, but you're all quite amazing with the work you've done, and especially these films blew my mind. Um, can I call you Zoe, Dr. Sharinian?
Zoe, please.
Zoe. I think every documentary filmmaker today in these panels got asked some version of this question, but this is a question that one of the questions that popped into my mind right away. Just how did you learn about the Sakthi Folk Cultural Center? And what was there a light bulb moment where you went, this is my next documentary project? How did you know this was the one?
Sure. Yeah, so I first learned about Shakti when I was doing my dissertation fieldwork at the Tamil Nadu Theological Seminary in Madurai. And I was working on Dalit liberation theology among Protestant Christians. And this is a seminary. And I was working with a particular, very radical theologian named Theophilus Sapavu. And he knew Sister Chandra, who's the head of Shakti. And they were just very interconnected because at the it's called TTS, the Tamil Nadu Theological Seminary. They put together. They were one of the first organizations, community groups, institutions to folklorize this parai drum, to put it on stage, to take it out of the village ritual context and put it on stage. And Shakti was started in 1990, and the first Dalit Arts Cultural Festival was in 95, I believe. And so Shakti was one of the first groups who came and were on stage. And probably one of the first NGO groups as well. Most of the other artists Parai artists who took part in that festival were professional male players. And this was an all-female group made of young women, many of them still in their teens. And so that's how I first found out about the Shakti Center. And when I was doing my field work for my dissertation, I learned about the Barai drum, and I'm a drummer, a stick drummer since age 11. And I mean, basically the light went off when I discovered this drum, and it was being used to accompany Christian folk songs and Christian folk liturgies, really. And this is going to be my next project. I want to study this drum. I want to be in the village, and so and have always been interested in the intersectionality between caste and gender, and so wanted to work on an all-female group. I have an earlier film called "This Is a Music Reclaiming an Untouchable Drum," and that was made about male musicians in the village. And after doing that, I really said, okay, I really want to focus just on women. And Shakti played a very small part in that, but then I decided, this is really so important, and that the center itself was doing such important work. It was a development project Yet it was founded, the foundation of the project is the folk arts, reclaiming the folk arts, instilling this sense of empowerment and self-esteem, Tannambike, in these young women. And it was really that model that I wanted to bring out in the film. So.
All right. Excellent. Very cool. And I think it's great that you had the personal connection with the drumming. So maybe
Oh,
there was an
absolutely.
emotional response that said, that is very interesting to me. So that's very cool that there was a little bit of a personal element to maybe to what drew you to that.
Well, it's very much
Um,
part of our method as ethnomusicologists is that we actually learn the art ourselves, and so then can better interpret it because we have it inside of ourselves. Yeah.
Excellent. Very cool. Um, I'm going to move on briefly to our next contestant, Ashish. Go on Rituparna. Similar question, starting out. How did you become aware of Rituparna out of perhaps all the activists you might have encountered in India? And similar question, what was the moment where you said, "This is a documentary"?
So I initially I did not plan on working on Rituparna's story, although I knew that I was looking for a story from the Northeast. So just a brief background, I Rituparna's story is one of four films that I completed during my Fulbright in India. And these are stories from tier two cities and towns in India. And they are stories that are looking at familial relationships of LGBTQ Indian activists. And obviously, both the activist and the family member had to be willing to be on camera. So that was the filter through which I had been reaching out. It took about a period of about a year and a half to prepare the groundwork. What helped me was that I had finished filming and launching films of a similar nature in the diaspora in the US. And it is through one of those films that I got connected to Indian organizations. So, for instance, Swikar, which is one organization that does parent advocacy of families that have an LGBTQ family member. And they started in Mumbai, but they have chapters in other places. So through their connection and through other activists that I came to know as in part of launching the film and the enthusiasm that I received, post 2018 India looks very different in terms of queer activism and visibility. So I was lucky in that regard, and I think I wouldn't have thought about doing a film in India had it not been for 2018, the Supreme Court judgment. And so Rituparna came into contact with me because I was filming in Lucknow, and one of the members of the Awadh Queer Pride put me in touch with her. And this was, 4 or 5 months before I had traveled to India. So I spent those few months, just getting to know her over WhatsApp or over Zoom calls. She was very curious as to what motivated me as a non-queer cis person to work in the space. And then she saw my work and she loved that lens because no one had talked to her mother about her story because Rituparna herself is so, if you see the film, she just comes across as somebody who can speak about just about anything on this planet. But including her mother meant a lot to me, and for her to be in the film was that cinched the deal for me. When she told me that her ma would be okay being on camera and that she would be only able to speak in Assamese, and I said absolutely fine. So that's how we came to meet.
Well, it seems like her ma isn't just okay with it. I mean, what a wonderful family to have been born into. I can imagine not everyone is that lucky anywhere. I wanted them to be my next door neighbors. They seem like such a wonderful family.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And especially from anyone that has traveled to Assam will know that the hospitality is just insanely like you feel like $1 million because every person treats you with you're such a special person who has come to their home, and you have this gamasa that they put around your neck and they feed you, and mean, that's probably common to all Indian households, but Assam is something special.
Very cool. Miriam, from the shadows, a little bit of a heavier question, perhaps, but there's a statement that sticks out in my mind among many poignant statements in the documentary. I might be misquoting it slightly, but I believe it was this. One of the people you're interviewing, society will reject her, her family will reject her. And that summarizes so much for me what these women are up against, even in coming forward at all through the organizations in India and through your documentary. And I know this is a question I saw other people getting asked today. It was already on my list to ask you, but it's so amazing that you were able to capture this. They all seem so comfortable on camera, talking about these very intimate, troubling things in their personal lives. Was that there to begin with? Was it a relationship you cultivated over time?
Thank you for that question. So, I think the film took me 6 years to make, and that level of comfort came with the time I invested with the film. It really very simply started in Kolkata when I saw a life-size shadow of a girl on the wall, which is how the film begins as well, with a hashtag that said missing and another that said every 8 minutes. And somewhere where the image kept reappearing on different walls, I felt like the shadow was following me in a sense. And I had been to London where I had seen, the Banksy walk and all of that. So I felt like I needed basically to know who was putting up this image and what was the story behind putting up the image. And very organically, I was led to the photographer who was uh, making this guerrilla art, and I followed her to the Sundarbans, which is the world's biggest delta, where every other family has a home of has a girl child missing in the family. Every other home has this situation. And just from being committed to following through and shooting, while shooting, there was this one girl who returned to the village, and she asked for help to file a case against her neighbors who were her traffickers. And instinctively, as a documentary filmmaker, and I've been one for more than 20 years, I felt like this was something I needed to follow through because it was uncharted territory for both of them, both the artist who suddenly found she was allies with a survivor, and the survivor herself, like you rightly putting herself out there to take on this very rare battle, because even the statistics in the film, which begins with the statistics, they are not really accurate. That's what the Crime Record Bureau puts out, and those are of the recorded cases. There are many more where no one is going to go and file a case at all because it seems like a hopeless sort of a journey. And I always had that sense of these are people who are, one, trusting the person I'm shooting with, who I was shooting with two activists who had worked with them to, fight the legal battle and the bigger fight. So they had those people's trust. And me coming in with the camera, obviously it creates, the minute there is a camera, there is a feeling that, it's an outside sort of an element. But the fact that I would show up at every single court hearing, irrespective, I think they very clearly felt I am fighting, I am on their side. And the camera is a witness and a testimony to something that hasn't been revealed. And I think that really kind of helped to set the tone. Also, my entire crew was from the region, spoke the language, and almost entirely an all-woman crew.
Oh, excellent. That was one of the questions I had. I mean, given the intimacy of it, that's great that you had an all-female crew. Zoe, similar question for you about what's the trick? I know it's not really a trick, but what is your approach to capturing, getting people comfortable sharing intimate thoughts and feelings with you?
That's a great question. Yeah, I also had an all women's crew. three different female
Excellent.
cinematographers. And um, the trick, well, the first for me was knowing the language and that the girls, and just hanging out with the girls, spending time with them, being very playful really with them, um, doing, their everyday things with them, taking interest in their lives, asking them questions. And um, um, there's some other really very specific techniques that we used in the film that are part of participatory video making. So one of them that was, is a bit challenging and really puts the subject um, you know, on point is this this technique. I don't even know what it's called, but it's this idea of breaking the fourth wall, and that when we did the few interviews that we did of the girls themselves, who were mostly they were older. There's two groups of girls. Ones that are in that year's training. So they just arrive, and we are following them throughout three different times that I visited with cameras. We're following throughout that year. And then there's girls who had been there for at least a year, and some of them at least 5 years. And it was those older girls that we interviewed, pretty intensely to get their stories. And we put them in a dark room, where the camera was really maybe 4 feet or less from their faces, and they're looking directly into the camera. And so they're speaking their truth, they're speaking their subjectivity, their agency, and and the two women that I had worked with, Tain Morisoundarajan and Tani Ikeda, were trained in participatory filmmaking. And they help these girls develop their stories through doing drama and storyboarding with them. But then when we put them in the room to interview them, we just said, go, just tell us your story. So it wasn't a typical anthropological interview session where, we have a little more authority and we're asking questions. Just tell your story. And that brought out a lot more emotion. There's several times that Kavita, was one of the senior girls, she starts to get very emotional and starts to cry. And we use those, in our editing, we use those scenes where the camera is, holds on her. It's a long shot, and she gets emotional, and she takes her dupatta and wipes her eyes and these kinds of things. But it's a very powerful thing, yet I think we had really worked up to that point by spending so much time with them and helping them through theater really to develop their own stories. And then they made their own film. So we're, at the same time, we're teaching them camera techniques, and they're filming us and we're filming them. And so, it becomes a real community project in that way. And they also get really used to having the cameras around. So.
Well, it worked really well. I mean, the intimacy of her emotional moments. At first, I kept thinking, cut away from this poor person. But then I really felt like there was a reason for it. It makes it, for me as an audience member, undeniable. I can't look away. I can't cut away, right? I'm going to keep watching and feeling to the extent possible the realness of her experiences. So it was indeed very powerful.
And that was very
Um,
intentional. That was very intentional, partly from my editor. My editor was uh, Jeff Palmer, and he's a Native American filmmaker, has done some really amazing work. And he has something he calls palmers, which are long shots where you just hold. And it allows, again, it's this way of creating a sense of subjectivity, agency. It allows the viewer to not be able to just take sound bites. They have to, it kind of forces them to engage with the situation of the people on the film. So yeah.
it's very effective. I mean, he probably knows this, but it had this kind of knee-jerk, almost psychological response from me as an audience member. I cannot look away from her now, or I'll be rude. You know, it's like it was too intimate. I should be nice and look away. But then I thought, no, then I'll be rude. It was so quick in my mind, but it really is effective. Um,
Thank
Ashish,
you.
I have a
Thank you very much.
question for you as well. For someone like Rituparna to go through so many travails and still exude such positivity, it was almost miraculous to me. I just loved it the both times I watched it. It comes through the screen and surrounds you. And she seems blessed with a really supportive family, which I mentioned earlier. The community at large, where she still lives in Assam locally, do they see her the way that we see her?
Absolutely. And I know that firsthand because uh, not only did I interview her and her mother in their family context, but I traveled to where she runs her organization in Dibrugarh and was able to meet with some of the key members, but also later on, when I returned with the rough cut of the film and I screened it for a very small audience, I was gathering, some last minute feedback and see if the film was effective as a tool because the project was conceptualized obviously as a storytelling, but more importantly as something that could be used within the community and outside the community to for compassion, for inculcating a sense of care, and so on. And what I saw in that group, she was leading a workshop of young queer activists who had come from really small towns and villages in Upper Assam, and they all call her Ba, Ritu Ba, right? And it was pretty crazy for them to see Rituba because they put Rituba on a pedestal, and Rituba comes across as this activist who's always strong, who's always leading, who's always showing the way. And in the film, they saw a Rituba that was also vulnerable and also, she evolved and she traces that evolution. And they were really quite struck by her. She, I've seen her on campuses at University of Guwahati. When we appeared on the campus, it was as if she was a Pied Piper. Students would just come out and just glom onto her. And they would just like ferry her to the cafeteria and we would just sit down and maybe would be sitting and every 5 minutes there would be an interruption because somebody would come and saying, you know, so she just has a way of being in the world. And I think because she embraces not just people within the queer community, but she offers her activism to many different places, whether it's library movement, whether it's intersectional feminism, and of course in the trans and queer community, she's held as a really great example to follow.
Yeah, one of my favorite moments is just that quick, probably less than a minute, I think, of her doing story time with some kids, reading a book to them.
Yeah,
That
and the
was
kids
really
obviously.
touching and
Yeah.
very cool. Yeah. Um, Miriam, question for you. So the title of this panel is Resistance, but as I rewatched these, I kind of thought maybe a better title would be Resilience. That's one thing all three of these have in common. I hope this isn't too much of a wild card question, but I'm wondering if you have any updates on Samina and her 8-year legal battle, which I suppose is even longer at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It was about resilience and from everyone's side, I think. Samina leading the way. And sadly, there's not been much progress with her case, besides the fact that it has moved to a different court and has also got that, initially when it was filed, it was a missing case where she had gone missing. But and this often happens, so it does not have the ramifications of that it is an abduction, that it is trafficking, that she has been sold, all of that. And more importantly, that she was a child when it happened. She was under the age of 18. So I think the progress that has been made is all those additional charges have been tacked onto her case, which means that hopefully, despite having spent all this time and nothing really coming of it, with these additional sort of charges, we are hoping that there is now, some sort of faster progress with the case. And there is also the backlog that happened with the pandemic, where the courts were not in sessions, and therefore there were not, there are all these pending cases lying in the court. So there is that backlog as well.
The length of time, the sluggishness of the system, you can see why so many people just like her might just give up eventually and go, I can't go on with this endless stress. You wouldn't blame them for going, I tried, I got to get on with my life. So, I mean, it's great that she has stuck it out for this long. And that's what made me think of the word resilience. And I hope she continues to be resilient. It's great that she's fighting that battle.
Yes.
Jeffrey, if I may add something to the point about slowness of the Indian judiciary, um, there is a wonderful film called The Court by I think it's Tamhane. It's a
Right.
Marathi film, which captures exactly the not just the impossibility of trying to see the end of a court case, but also the speed at which things move and the motions through which you have to go through. And each court appearance, you're just showing up to just get a date for the next one. And there's no hearing, there's nothing that happens. The only process that happens on that given day is you're given the next day, and which might be a few months. Sorry, just wanted to add that.
And how many, I mean, you probably don't know the answer to this, but then you add to that the time it took them to get there to court, how many hours they spend there waiting to get that information and then leave. It does take so much passion and resilience on apparently anyone's part if you're up against the court system, but it's especially for something so traumatic. It's great that she's, I hope, continuing to fight the fight. Um, Zoe, your documentary kind of ends on a note of optimism and hope as I took it. But at the same time, the larger situation, I thought, oh, it's so bleak. Um, do you think, in your opinion or in your research, that things are gradually improving for the Dalit population?
Well, in general, it's so interesting how Annette Danto's film, Dindigul Diaries, is parallels my film. Like her characters, the women in her film are the mothers of the young women in my film in many ways. It's the same town, same town.
At Dindigul, I thought so. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, same town. And so I do very much see that shift, even over the, oh gosh, it must be at least 35 years now of the Shakti Folk Cultural Center, the impact they've had on the community of educating these girls. And I see the same impact, that the message of impact in Annette's film is education makes so much difference. And all of these girls, not only were they Dalits, women, poor, they're all high school dropouts. And that's really the crux for them, the issue for them. It's not, oh, we're, outcast people, we're Dalits. The issue for them is that they were the shame of being high school dropouts. And so much of the center's work is to tutor them for them to pass their exams and then to send them on to college. And that was really the year I was there was the first year, and it was 25 years that they were having girls go to college. And it was a local community college, but that was making a huge difference. And in the couple years after that, more girls went. And so, and just following, being in touch with those young women. We're on Facebook together, that kind of thing, and knowing, but there is a disconnect for me with in their lives, that it doesn't feel like there's enough follow through. If the young women stay with the center, they've got a good job, they're still involved in the folk arts, they're training other young women, but I think they have better jobs. They're certainly not working in the fields in their villages, which is probably what they would have had. They're working in town in various kinds of jobs, but there isn't necessarily, I think, I would like to see a greater impact. And I think this is another film I wanted, or another study to at least follow up and see in the lives of these women, what impact that has on their children, for example, them having more education, having a higher class level, having more of a sense of pride as a Dalit person. But the Shakti Center is very much part of a larger network of the Dalit liberation movement within Tamil Nadu. And there has been an incredible shift in the value of the Parai drum within that movement, within the larger, really the mainstream. Various festivals, the Chennai Sangamam Folk Music Festival did an incredible impact for about 5 years, and then it was off because of a different administration, and now it's back on with the DMK administration, and and also through filmmaking of people like Par Ranjit, Tamil film, Bollywood film style, that they've been bringing the drum into these films and film and subjects within popular film about musicians themselves. So that has made a huge difference. Like it's really, the drum has gone mainstream. Now, how much has that impacted the artists? That's other work that I'm doing right now. It has not necessarily impacted the artists to the degree that we'd like to. The drum is being appropriated to a certain degree by other middle caste folks. And in America, there are now more than 20 groups of Parai players in America, and they're all IT, middle caste, um, Tamils who have never played the instrument before, would never have touched it back in their villages in India. Yet in America, they're feeling this sense of freedom and they're taking it up. But they're very much appropriating it in that they're not giving the knowledge bearers, the teachers. They're not hiring those teachers to come over to the US and teach them. They're not giving the same respect to the traditional knowledge bearers as they are to the instrument. They're really disembodying it. So it's a very interesting phenomenon that I've been following up on and doing a lot of work on in the last couple of years. So long answer. Sorry.
No, that was a great answer. I'm biting my tongue to not ask you 20 more follow-up questions to that. I'll wait. It made me think of a lot of things I would like to branch off on from that. Ashish, I have a final question for both Miriam and Ashish, and then we can open it up to the floor. I think this one's easy. Ashish, what's next in your docu-series? You said you're working on some other, or this was part of a 4-part thing. Could you elaborate a little bit on what's coming up next for you?
Sure. So Rituparna's film, along with 2 films that I shot in Lucknow and a 4th film that I shot in Chandigarh, I've finished 2 of them, and this summer, I can't wait, in 2 more weeks, I will begin working on the other 2. They're very different films. The Lucknow film is about a Bengali family, where a queer daughter and a mother living together, along with the daughter's partner. And another story from Lucknow is of a 52-year-old gay man, Arif Jafar, who's very well known in the activist circles in India because he happened to be one of those rare cases where somebody was actually arrested under Section 377. And this is early 90s, and he was an AIDS HIV activist. And his mother, who recently passed away, actually was also a phenomenal force in his life. And so it's a story of his community, his congregation in his mosque. And then the Chandigarh film is about another trans activist who was who was turned away from her birth home. And for years, she basically, figured out how to be and started living with the Hijra community in Chandigarh, and found her feet, got, had a hunger for education and found a way through the university, advocated for herself, advocated for trans reservations and affirmative action in colleges. And very recently, about 3 or 4 years ago, a 94-year-old Sikh couple in Chandigarh adopted her. And their daughter was the dance teacher from home. Dhananjay was taking lessons, and she knew that her parents had an empty home. And then she said, what a wonderful way for both the needs to be met. And I will have somebody who can be a presence in the house of an elderly parents, and Dhananjay will have a home. So it's really all of these stories have just amazing humans in them. I'm just lucky.
Yeah, that's
Found them.
fantastic. I can't wait to see more. Miriam, I have an artistic question for you. Um, I loved the use of the shadowy animations as transitions throughout the documentary. How did you come up with that idea? Who's the amazing animator behind it? How did that come about?
So I'm going to take your question in conjunction with what Ashish said earlier about court. So the difference between filming a fiction court film as against a real life case of where there's a sexual offense happen, and that too with a minor. Post the Delhi Nirbhaya case, which everyone knows of, the assault in the bus, and there have been sort of landmark rulings about even representation of survivors. So anyone doing a real film, you have a very huge, it's the reason why no one would take up a subject like that, because over and above it being a sensitive subject, we are sort of boxed in with what we can and can't represent, consent being key. And in fact, Samina, I had filmed with for almost more than 3 years, close to 4 years. When she came and she told me, your film's going to be out before my verdict, in which case I don't want my face to be shown. So the film that y'all are seeing now is completely a redacted version of what I had shot. And it was a point in time which I actually thought that I'm not going to continue with the shoot because as a filmmaker, you can understand that the face and the expressions are really the canvas with which you're shooting. There's so much that does not come with a soundbite, it's the expression. So when that is taken away from you, you actually feel like, how am I going to continue to make this film? So this is a film that taught me a different way. It kind of demanded how I would make this film, which was I fortunately had a residency in LA, and I took that time to actually consider and think that, no, I am going to continue making this film because I was showing it to other people. And I had enough of a story to still try to make the film. If I went into the edit room, and make Samina almost the image I first saw her, which was a shadow on the wall, where you're only going to see her form, you're never going to see her face, and it's going to demand from the viewer to kind of lean into that world and listen much harder. And that is the world of survivors. And that's partly also when I started brainstorming on other ways of how do then I bring out this story if I'm going to stick on and do this story, which was the idea of using shadows. And this, it's the oldest form of storytelling where I would remember even my mom telling me stories at bedtime, and the way her hands move, they're throwing sort of shadows on the wall, and you associate story time with shadows. And also the fact that the whole film emerged from the shadows in that sense. So it came from that idea. I came back and I started looking. I didn't want traditional animation, but I started looking at the work of shadowgraphy and people who use sort of hand shadows. And I found this grandfather, like a father and a son. The father is one of the last persons using this form of shadowgraphy to actually like almost animate stuff, and his son, who is into IT, has like started blending it with technology to create a form of animation. So that is how I wove that thread of the shadow play into the entire film. But it to me it really taught how constraints and kind of narrowing the framework of what you can tell forces you to push your sort of limits of creativity to find ways to still tell that story.
Well, it was really wonderful, and hearing you talk about shadow puppetry as part of it. Um, a little bit of a crossover into my own research. India's first professional filmmaker, Hiralal Sen from Bengal, when he was growing up in the 19th century, and his cousin, it's a big part of his biography, did shadow puppetry, which is not unusual for kids then, using what was called a magic lantern, so not just a lantern, but they would go hardcore in depth and do the whole Ramayana and invite the family over to watch. And he always said that was why as soon as silent film hit India, 1898, he knew he had to be part of that. And to him, it became a natural extension. Film was a natural extension of, I believe in Bangla, Chaya Chitra, shadow pictures. So that was very cool. And it kind of reminded me, just because of my own research, those images in your transitions also made that come to my mind. It was very well done, and it matched so well with the subject matter anyway, but it was done so artfully that I really appreciated that.
Thank you.
Um, Questions from the floor. Would anyone like to, Corlin? I see a hand. I see Corlin's hand.
Thank you. This is great to listen to. I had, like Jeff, I was finding myself having 1,000 questions. And then kind of Miriam created an opening for me by talking about how you had to shift your representation because of the court case not being completed before your film was to come out. And wow, who would have thought of that, right, in the beginning? But it made me really, I was already thinking about embodiment, and the thing that stimulated it for me originally was Zoe's film, and how my sense anyway of what happens to kind of girls moving into adolescence, and the going from playing children to being very constrained in terms of what you can do with your body and where your body can go, and then the drumming just seemed to me, because it's so loud and so rhythmic and there's so much movement going on, you can't help but move to it. And I just thought, it just seems so freeing, right? And if you're working on self-esteem, if you're working on finding voice, all of the things that I think Shakti is trying to do, it just seems like this kind of beautiful and like thing that's linked to the culture already, to kind of use the drum in that way. And so, and then I was thinking of Ashish's film and what it means for trans folks to be not only in sort of traditional forms of ritual in public performing, but to be fully on screen as themselves in everyday kind of life. And that sort of quotidian kind of bodily representation, it seems to me there's something really important about that, because of the, there's this kind of acceptance when it's in a festival or when, it's in a certain very limited kind of performative context. But what does it mean for trans folks? I know that's a whole spectrum of people in India, but to be able to, fully embodied show up not in a non-performative way, and and to be held up as a worthy person. So I was thinking about that already when Miriam started talking about having to kind of remove the embodiment, but then finding a way to do it that was very poignant in her film. So I wonder if Zoe or Ashish could kind of speak to the embodiment issues and how you were thinking about that as you were creating your films.
Yeah, but Ritu, it was always clear to me that uh, her being seen in public, I mean, she is always in public,
Huh.
but see it in the film was important. And as any filmmaker will attest, you often don't have the luxury of spending a lot of times with your subjects. And I know in Miriam's case, you had a longitudinal kind of duration for making this film. And I had, I was time delimited. So I wanted to make sure that I captured Ritu in those very contexts that the audiences does not imagine a trans body, or they have been trained not to think of trans people in a certain way. And so that whole sequence with her stepping out of the home, going to the marketplace, eating pukcha on the side of the road, all of those, going into performing the quotidian tasks of the day, just being in the world. I think that was intentionally, kind of, filmed while I was with her, knowing that she does that anyways. And there was much more that I couldn't capture, but yeah, that was a big part of it. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. So I think the message of transformation that I was trying to communicate through the film is very much done visually through the developing embodiment over the course of the year of the first year students. So my first film was very talking heads heavy narrative. It was like 3 layers of narration, and I really wanted to get away from that and have a much more kind of artistic and just trust the visuals and the sound to be able to communicate the message. And so that was really that sense of embodiment of self-esteem. And I really love what you said, that yes, women in India generally, they hit puberty and it's all about constraint and keep them in the house. And this is the complete opposite of that. But they have to go through that process. And I'm trying to show the model, the pedagogical model through the folk arts and through various leadership training and these kinds of things of how Shakti is doing this for these young girls, and using the arts to do it. Self-esteem, that's all what it's about. But that it's a community project. It takes the support of the community to do that. So it's an embodiment, of power, of empowerment by a Dalit female community. It's not just individuals at all.
That makes sense. Thank you very much.
Lauren and then John. Lauren, I saw your hand go up first.
Yep. Thank you all very much. I'm absolutely fascinated by everything that I've learned today. I want to ask a narrow question of Jeff Stanley, if I may, and then a specific question for each of the filmmakers. When did a documentary become a form of filmmaking, and when did it really come on the stage? In other words, there's this first attempt, a first phase. When did it come on the stage? And did it start with or without voice over silent films?
Yeah, I can address that. I'm going to do it briefly because I'm only the moderator. Yeah, the French started doing it first. They were called actualities. These were silent. Today we'd say cinema verite. Sometimes it was just footage of people walking down the street or working in a factory. They were really looking back, the first documentaries. That was still very much in the days where we could say the medium was the message. People were just going to see movies because it was movies, moving pictures. They started to get more sophisticated. Edison started doing it in New York. And then at the time in India, all they were seeing when these first film exhibitors started popping up, including Hiralal Sen, there are all these Europeans and Americans traveling around India, setting up tents, charging people to watch stuff. So at first, all Hiralal Sen could show was European and American imported films, but even some of those were actualities.
Mhm.
And pretty soon he had his own camera. He wasn't just showing projections, he got a camera and started filming Indian actualities. And it was a very big moment. It took a while before advertising happened. Not long after that, it went from being actualities to what were called ad films, advertisement films. And so it was one of the first things you could do, especially when there were no studios or sets. You went out with a camera and shot what was there.
Hmm.
So looking back, yeah, sure, those are the world's first documentaries.
When did the French start doing it? 1800s, early 1900s? You
Eight,
know?
late 1800s,
Oh,
ballpark between 1896 and 1898-ish.
that's
Uh,
close enough for today. Thank you.
Close enough. Yeah.
My question is a technical one. I heard earlier today people talking about the amount of footage that they shot and then put into a 45-minute or 2-hour documentary or whatever. When you approach it, each of you, as this is the documentary I'm going to do, what is your thought process, if you can summarize it, of I'm going to have to spend 50 hours or 200 hours actually filming and then shrink it down and edit it down to whatever you want your documentary to become? Can you describe something of the art and the craft that goes into that phase of a documentary? Hope it's a fair question. Anybody?
I'll take a
Don't look
stab
at
at it
me.
because my approach was very strategically informed in that I knew I had limited amount of time to film. So it was the inverse process as opposed to somebody that goes into more of an open-ended situation such as Miriam, where you don't know how much you have to film until the film can be called. And I went in with a particular frame, so I had a certain amount of budget. So there's many things that can guide how much you can shoot. It's the scope of the story, it's how much time you have, how much money you have to spend. So organizing a unit in Assam and doing an intensive 5-day shoot out of the 3 weeks that I spent in Assam was what I could afford and what I could manage. And my intention was always to create shorts out of this because I wanted these films to have distribution in the most unlikely places. And I was planning a distribution through an online portal. And I know that people's online habits are quite different from when they're watching films on Netflix or elsewhere. So that was my approach, that I knew that I had limited shoots that I needed to do, and I framed things in a certain way that I could achieve those objectives. And then, of course, you have to leave room for people to say what they have to say. So that's something you cannot control, is the interviews. You have to allow Rituparna, and you have to allow her mother the time that they need to say what has to be said.
Yep, thank you.
John, you've been very patient. Uh, Thank you for your patience. What is your question?
Hi, I'm John Borson. I'm a filmmaker myself, and I was on a Fulbright to Pune teaching screenwriting back in the 80s.
Wow.
But I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I help put this together. And I must to say, I'm very pleased to meet all of you. I'm so impressed with all you filmmakers. You're so smart and compassionate and sincere and thoughtful and skillful. I'm just an honor to hear you talk. And these last three in particularly, how you organize these is one of our problems, and resistance. And you were saying it's really resilience. And it's another way of saying that is it's hope. And I have to say that your film and is a testament to hope. I mean, it's just amazing. And you get a sense of change with the film about the Dalits, get a sense of change and evolution. But Miriam, I wanted to ask you, where is the hope here? I mean, just tell me, has there ever been one of these trials that has ever gone through? Has there been a single one that's made it yet? That's my question.
Thank you, John. Yes. So I'm really happy you asked that question, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the period in time where I actually thought I would give up on the film. And that is when I started, besides thinking, how am I going to represent Samina, also start looking for other hopeful cases. And that is when I found the case study of Ella and Hasina, who are another pair of a survivor and an activist who were in the neighboring state. And Ella had got a conviction. She gave her testimony when 400 other witnesses went hostile. And it ended up with her trafficker, who was actually a very politically connected person, land up in prison. And therefore, sometimes when you're thrown up against challenges is when you start thinking, what are the other ways of telling the story? I may have just stuck with
When did that
Samina's.
happen? When did that happen?
When did she get the conviction?
Yeah. How long ago?
I think in like early 2000s.
Oh, it's been 25 years since there's been a conviction?
There have been other convictions, but for me, it was important to
Yeah,
focus
no.
on the sort of human trajectory. And Ella is an important, where I couldn't show Samina's face, I could show Ella's face, because not only had she got the verdict, the incredible thing was that she was working with Hasina, who has worked with, thousands, 10,000 cases of human trafficking. And she works with Hasina to mentor other survivors. And even in my film, in fact, the quote that Jeffrey brought about, that, this is what is going to happen to you. Your family may not accept you. Be prepared. It was coming from Ella, who is a survivor, and has seen it herself. Her family did not accept her. And yet she has made it her mission to go out there and work with other survivors. So this is the
So,
way I
Tachi,
kind of
my
turned
question for
around
you,
the whole
my question
thing.
for you is whether is this bending toward justice? Is there any chance that this will happen more often, or is this just still going to be once every 10 years something's going to happen?
So I have to tell you, for myself, I'm a dedicated filmmaker. I move from film to film to film. But this is the first time in my life I took an entire year and a half off after the film to not distribute the film like I usually do, which is like broadcast and all of that. I really worked on screenings, impact screenings. So we took Ella, for instance, to the border security forces, who are men in camouflage, who are between the lines of Nepal, Bangladesh, and India. And we screened the film for them with Ella present. And she spoke to them not as a victim, but as a domain expert now working in the field. And there is where I saw the change, where these men who are actually at the point of being able to do something. I could see the effect of having seen the documentary and then interacting with Ella. And we did several such screenings for almost a year and a half. We were fortunate to get an impact grant from the US, and that helped us to do these screenings. And Ella, her demeanor has changed while we took her for these screenings and stuff. Her whole body language changed. That was a sort of cathartic process for her as well, to kind of be the spokesman of this film. And she said, this is my film. And for me, that was like a big
That's an
sort of.
amazing story. That a documentary can actually help make change is incredible, and the most valuable thing a documentary can do, both in her performance and in the attitude of the others. That's a tremendous achievement you've made a film that have done that with people. It's very rare and very hard to do.
Thank you. And I do hope that, therefore, even the girls that you see who return to Bangladesh, they spoke to us once they were back in Bangladesh. And we had screenings again in India as well as in Bangladesh, where again they were spokespeople. So I think half of it is to be able to address what is considered a taboo subject, and where people are not using that language of victimhood, but rather of we are survivors and we show that resilience and we have to be central to the change that is in policy and everything. What we have to say has to be central to it.
Well, thank you.
Miriam, you have a question?
That's me.
Oh, Miriam Rinalini, sorry, two M's. I got tripped up.
Um, so actually, Miriam touched on what I was going to, is the observation I was going to make, was that all three films show resilience in living with a stigma. In Indian society, uh, being part of the trans community, I mean, we were always programmed to run when we saw a hijra because they were scary to us. And then, prostitution too, it's coming back with that load, carrying that load and coming back home couldn't have been easy. And then also, um, being a high school dropout, I'd always heard about the caste issues, though you don't see it as much in the cities. I definitely experienced it when I lived in a village in Rajasthan, that, caste is a huge um, handicap. But I didn't realize that being a high school dropout was a larger handicap in some places in India. But just, I think all three films showed that resilience. It's just, and as John says, sharing these documentaries, being able to have these documentaries make, you know, they they should hopefully will initiate change in a larger community on a global scale. So that was just my observation.
If I can respond to that, thank you. I think there's so much of an intersection between education and caste that we absolutely have to recognize. I mean, there's the trope of the untouchable on the veranda of the school, right? That's in a trope that's in so many autobiographies and that kind of thing. And I think what is behind the fact that these girls are dropouts is that they haven't had support from teachers. They've been shamed by teachers because the teachers know that they're untouchables or outcasts, and I think that's so important. Yet we really do see change. We really do see so many of these communities coming up. The level, like most kids from these communities, at least in Tamil Nadu, graduate from 10th or at least get up through the 10th. But I would also ask the question about, I really appreciate you saying how you were taught to run from hijras. But I'm really also curious about the sense of being taught about the sense of, it's almost the rasa of disgust, untouchability, and the distancing from untouchable people, this sense of inner disgust. And can you speak to that, or can anyone?
Yeah, so it's part of that social programming, both with the hijras and with the trans community and with the untouchables, with the Dalits. It's you do what you're taught to do as a child. You really don't know any better. And it was only after coming to the US that I was able to kind of make that distinction, grasp the fact that they're humans and that there isn't any real distinction other than that which society places on them. I don't know the historical reasoning for that. I never really explored that. But I actually wanted to touch on another point, when you talked about, sorry, when you just mentioned untouchability in education. When I was in living in that village in Rajasthan, I was working with the untouchable community, as working with the lower uh, caste children. Um, but there were two sisters who were, they were from the community, and I'm drawing a blank for the name right now, but they're the ones who dealt with the dead animals. And even though in my eyes all these girls were the same, there was the domes, yeah. Well, they weren't called domes in Rajasthan. There was another term for them, as far as I remember. But, the other girls would shun these two sisters, and one of them had a stronger personality, and she protested that, and she objected, and she complained. But the other girls wouldn't allow them to touch the water. They wouldn't allow them to touch the vessel that was used to draw the water out from the well, the drinking water that the girls would have. They wouldn't allow them to sit with everybody during meal times. And obviously, once we were made aware of this, we definitely put our foot down and insisted. But there was always that sense of them being social outcasts just because they came from that family. But speaking to education of that community, these children had never, and they were teenagers. I was with 15, 16-year-olds. So it was these children had never held a book. They'd never held a pencil. They didn't know how to hold a pencil, and they didn't know which side of the book to look at, to open from. They didn't know what the spine was. They didn't know what the front cover or the back cover was. I mean, it was just, sorry, makes me emotional. But there's definitely that connection between education and caste that kind of gets glossed over.
But also, Rituparna speaks about that in her work, how for her she understood that she had to put up with all of those, innuendos and insults that were hurled her way because education was her tool for empowerment. And she knows that in the trans community, that is something much as in the Dalit community, much as in most marginalized communities that are not afforded the opportunity. That was one of the ways, not the only way, but one of the ways that she could gain, a standing. She already had a voice. She needed the standing. She needed the status, right? And so this, you know, what she's doing now is she's making sure that that aspect of denial that she felt gets, erased to some extent by access through libraries, through open library movement that she's a big part of in Assam and in other parts of India, because that's something so fundamental that we in the US could not even imagine for a second that a smallest little town won't have a public library that one can access. That's completely absent in small towns in India. And then that's part of what she's doing right now is she recognizing that educational access through libraries, to informal education, where you can actually take a book home, because school libraries don't allow kids to bring books home. You know, you're supposed to leave them there. So to grow up with books, and that's something she learned because her mother brought her those magazines, to grow up with books, to have books around you, that's a phenomenal change in your ecosystem that inculcates a sense of curiosity, as certain ways that education in school cannot achieve. That happens when you have books in your home with you all the time.
Well, if I can, I think the Shakti Center is working on two levels. There is the expected, society, government-based school system, very much based in an old British model, right? The 3 R's, right? You should achieve these things. And in passing your exams, you also, even if you're in a Tamil medium, for example, you also have to pass English. And that was sometimes the one exam students hadn't passed. But at the same time, they're trying to uplift and reclaim the value of the folk arts, which are the people's arts, which are Dalit arts. And yes, they do them in their villages. They do the kumi dance, so this to me is also this idea of, can the subaltern speak? Well, that's not the right question, because the subaltern speak is, just as you're saying, it's about having a standing. It's about having a place in the public sphere. But here it's, the subaltern don't speak, they sing, they drum, they express themselves, they express their agency through their own arts. And so let's recognize those arts. Let's bring, there's a value of classical, popular, Bollywood, and then folk, just like the people, upper caste, middle caste, low caste, outcasts. Let's flip the script and reclaim the value of the folk arts as not untouchable, as not polluting, as valuable, and the voices and bodies of the people who carry that knowledge and speak that knowledge.
I
Yeah,
was
I just
reminded about Martin Luther King's thing about drum majors when I was watching your film. He
Okay,
has
I don't know that.
he was a big advocate of drum majors.
I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, you
Thank
should
you.
look it up. Yeah.
Okay, I will.
So I
Miriam?
just wanted to share a little episode which I think intersects very beautifully with all of this, where the outcasts, in a sense, culturally appropriate themselves. So the sex workers are also an outcast community. And while we were filming, and this was a motif in the film where we keep filming the Durga Puja, which Durga, who is the mother deity, the goddess deity, and the main deity in this milieu. So we filmed many years, and one year that we filmed, we were actually filming in Sonagachi, which is the red light district. And they had got this. So I saw the power of collectivism, where the sex workers had organized themselves. And, culturally, the Durga idol is made from earth. And the first fist of earth is supposed to come from Sonagachi, which is the red light district, and given to the potters to make the idol. But the irony was that they weren't allowed to worship in public. So this collective actually filed a court case, won it. And when we were filming, for the first time, they were actually celebrating in public, where they had this sort of Durga idol in public. In Sonagachi, they had women drummers playing, which is not seen. They had the trans community and the hijras dancing along. And I thought that was such a fantastic sort of a subplot that happened within the film and while we were filming. And you're blessed in that sense as a documentary filmmaker to see the course of history kind of get rewritten right there by the community
Great
themselves.
point. Yeah.
Lauren.
Yes. Great commentary. I will be watching each of the films again, of the all 9. I may have mentioned that earlier. My question for the 3 filmmakers, you could have 1 or 2 or no answers. What's on your mind for the next documentary? Besides that, what should be the next documentary that you would have a hand in or somebody else would have a hand in? That's 2 different questions. Was I clear?
Yes. Well, okay, I'm going to go first since I'm unmuted. So while I was shooting From the Shadows, there was another case that erupted where an actress was assaulted in a moving car. And this time it was in a state that I belong to, which is Kerala. And it just brought my attention closer home because Kerala is a state that has some of the highest social indices in the country for health and literacy and all of that. And it happened in the filmmaking community to which I belong. I saw an organically sort of group of women come together, call themselves the Women in Cinema Collective, and they came from different walks of cinema and they stood by the survivor. It was a few weeks before the Me Too movement actually happened in the West. And I started kind of following that very closely in terms of, we think that it happens out there, but it's really happening here. And I started documenting the stories of these women who had come together. And it really became now the subject of my research currently, which is the contribution of women in cinema and collectivism as a tool to make it a more equal playing field, as well as women storytellers. I think storytelling is one of the most powerful mediums of change. And therefore, the role of women storytellers in putting out these different narratives also to kind of shape our collective consciousness in that sense. So that is my next project. It's actually morphing into many different forms. It's going to be the manuscript of a book. I've worked also on episodic series of these forgotten chapters, Jeffrey, to the very beginning of cinema in India and some of the first women entrepreneurs who have been forgotten, who laid the foundation in many ways, who belong to the fringes, but have kind of really made those first landmark steps. So that is a series I'm working on. Also, conversations of some of the really remarkable women. I'm working with Mrinalini on that to see how we can have some of the women authors speak about their craft and how they've, brought cinema to a worldwide audience.
Very interesting, fascinating. Thank you. Any
Really
other answers?
profound work. I'm really super excited to see it come to life. I'm a fan of both your films, and in the film about the RA colony, I happened to be in the vicinity of that, so it was really uh, profoundly moving and powerful, kind of capturing of the ground reality. And I love how you visually sort of isolated the RA soundscape from the cityscape in the film. So you really feel the difference and what the destruction would actually do.
Thank you so much, Ashish. It means a lot coming from you. Thank you.
So my films, there should be a trilogy. I've made two films on the Parai drum. The first one is more on the male players in the village. And so the trilogy should be the diaspora. So what's going on in the diaspora. But so that's what it should be. But I think what I really want it to be is I'm starting a new GIS mapping project where we're going to do a large data collection. It's very much a collaborative team. There's 10 members of my team. Most of them we're all drummers, and most of them are people from the community. And they're going to be doing the research and training young drummers to go and interview their elders using iPads and Zoom H4 recorders. But so they'll be doing the collecting and the creating a stronger relationship with their elders. And then we're gonna analyze a lot of this data and map it on a internet site, with a map, but other things as well. But as part of that, if I get the funds that I'm hoping for particularly from the NEH, fingers crossed, I want to do a series of short films of these drummers. So take, of maybe 100 people that we end up interviewing, going back with a really good cinematographer and doing shorter films of it, probably 6 of these knowledge bearers. And who knows what the narrative of those films will be, but that's where I'm going. And I think those films will be available on the site, but then I think we can also put those out into film festivals, more as shorts.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Miriam, I might reach out to you because right now I'm just developing the impact tour of my films because I've collected about 6 of them at this point, six or potentially 8 films, and I'm trying to program them for different audiences. And I might pick your brain. I know you're still wrapping up things at your Fulbright.
Very happy to pitch in for Impact. It's been a very fulfilling and new journey, I think, to kind of commit to certain goals you want with your film and to see it
Yeah.
through. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it also helps the film in terms of longevity. It just goes into spaces you least expected that it would go. And
Very cool. Oh, is there a hand raised? Yes, there is. Tanya, please.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you so much. I'm a bit of an outlier. I'm actually Ashish's wife and not a filmmaker. But this was such a fantastic discussion, and I haven't had the chance to see Miriam and Zoe's film yet, but wow, what amazing work. I don't know whether we still have time, but if you have
Yes.
any more anecdotes to just share a little bit of the community's reaction to your films, if there's something, especially, I was very interested to see how the Border Patrol agents, reacted, or any other reactions. That would be fantastic. So thank you.
yeah, I think 2 amazing reactions. We showed to the Border Security Force twice. So once while we were making the film, and they actually feature within the film because they helped to repatriate a group of Bangladeshi young girls who were trafficked very young to India, and they were returning to their homeland in Bangladesh. So for the first time, the gate was opened at a certain place on the border, and they were sent, so they can actually see themselves within the film. So the first time we showed it as a work in progress to them, that particular scene. And I think it struck a chord because by the time we came back the second time on, they actually brought these women Border Security Force officers and told us, she helped to solve a case, and she was felicitated. And also there was I would say, a very honest conversation that happened because they could see themselves within the film, and they were not they weren't just negative, they were actually playing a sort of a facilitating role. So that helped to kind of have a difficult conversation about all the challenges they face in terms of identifying middlemen. And very often it's the girls who get booked, who are being trafficked, and they're actually children, whereas the middlemen go scot-free, and because they have the resources, they can pay their way through. So there was a very difficult conversation that actually happened about identifying the role of middlemen. And I personally felt it was a big breakthrough in conversation. And we were invited to 2 other Border Security Force places where Ella was felicitated, and that itself is a big thing to see, how regimental an army unit is. So to see when your top officer kind of felicitates someone who is considered a sex worker or a victim, but is instead so there was a lot of change in language, I think, that could be felt, was very palpable at these sort of screenings. The other one I would point out was the India-Bangladesh border, where we had screenings. So they had zero infrastructure to have a screening. There was no movie hall, no school, nothing at all. So we literally ferried a screen and a projector over the river to them. We had a little tuk-tuk which had a speaker, microphone, and someone who would go around announcing that there would be a screening in the evening. And we were all set up, and we would wonder if anyone would show up, and magically from, when field work would end, first the children would come really sort of enthralled by the fact that there's a projector, and they were like doing these shadow things on the screen because they were just fascinated by a projector. And then their moms and fathers and everyone would come and just sit there and watch the film, and their interactions, because those are actually places where every other home has a missing case. So the kind of interactions that came out from there were quite chilling. And the fact that they were now able to not link it to trafficking and not just as missing cases.
I'm realizing I've done impact screenings, just never called them that, but thank you for that term, Miriam. I would love to be able to use it. But I've done public humanities work with a grant from the University of Oklahoma. I took Shakti vibrations around to at least 5, 6, 7 different of these groups of Parai drummers in the diaspora. So Seattle, St. Louis, several other places. And so worked with people who already were drumming and sort of their extended community, some of their family members, et cetera. Some people who hadn't drummed before. And then I did a survey. I had a Qualtrics survey that they would do on their phones. And again, anonymous. So I could get a lot of the biographical information about who these drummers were in the diaspora, what their caste was, if they had an arranged marriage. Many of them had love marriages. Really, like over 50% of these people had love marriages, what caste level they were, what education, what industry, everything, all of this. But the real purpose of that for me, what I knew I wanted to do was engage folks in the diaspora in discussions of caste in the diaspora. And that is, of course, you probably all know that's really difficult to do. And also senses of intersectionality between caste and gender. And what I learned was this idea, first of all, that they really had an attitude of appropriation in that they were afraid, I don't know, I'm just using that word, but they were unwilling to call this a Dalit drum. That Dalit for them, that term didn't represent, as I understand it, as I guess more of a political term of anti-caste. This is a movement against caste, but they either understood it as a conflation of the term outcast or as a very politicized term related to political parties. Oh, this is just those few political parties in Tamil Nadu or wherever, and it's just politicians. And we don't want to just engage in all that. But they refer to this drum, and this is the Tamil community in America. They refer to the drum, they've embraced it, and this is our ancient Tamil instrument. So they erase 1,000 years of untouchability, 1,000 years of history, and they go back to the Tamil treatises, the Silapadikaram and earlier ones, the Sangam literature, where the word parai comes up. And they said, this proves that this is our ancient Dravidian Tamil drum. It's not a Dalit drum, that it's being called a Dalit drum. And so that's a fascinating discussion. I've got wonderful data on that I'm trying to work with, that's really inspired my present mapping project to show this community that there's so much diversity in this drumming back in Tamil Nadu, and I want them to support that particularly through hiring drummers to come to the US and teach them.
Wow. I just saw Sinners a couple of weekends ago, and I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it's about exactly this issue of appropriation, and he does it in a very interesting way of a blues community in Jim Crow South, and how they get infected by by vampires, and who make their music their own from there on, right? Very good
That
example there.
thing has happened with Indian dance as well. That's
Very
something,
much so.
yeah.
And I mean, what's so interesting is this is a very contemporary version of what happened with Indian dance, starting, with Bharatanatyam, starting in the 40s, maybe a little earlier than that, with Rukmani Devi and Bala Saraswati and all of that. And so I'm doing a lot of dialogue with that literature and with the folks who have written that literature, close friends of mine, Devesh Sonaji, Hari Krishnan, but the absolute parallel there, but just contemporary issues of diaspora is really interesting, I think.
So just sharing, completely unrelated. My grandfather, my Bengali grandfather, came to University of Oklahoma back in the late 1800s, and got
Wow.
his second medical degree. He worked there as a sweeper in the medical department, and then got the chair, convinced the chair to let him go through a school, and he was certified as, I mean, he earned his degree as a doctor in the US, and then he was in the American Army and went back and married my grandmother. But my grandmother was his fourth wife. But anyway,
Wow, would love to hear more about that. We'll be
yeah,
in touch.
University of Oklahoma,
Wow.
and that far back in time. So very cool. Should definitely allow Diana off the hook now. Uh,
Yeah, we're
Above and beyond, Diana. Thank you so much for hanging in
thank you,
with us.
Diana, for sticking it out for
Uh,
3 of these things today.
yes, and it was honestly, if you hadn't been here, I would have been messing up big time and really messing things up around here. So I'm just gonna end the recording here. We can stay on as long as everybody wants to. Lauren has a question.